Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. We have a brand new letter from Chris Roberts, so today I will be breaking down the need to know. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you guys so much for the support. It is truly appreciated, and if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. So before we get to it, I do highly recommend reading through the letter for yourself, as it is full of information about what has been going on and where we are heading. But I will go through the important need-to-know stuff, so let us get on with it. So let's start with the TLDR. So for those of you who just need the straightforward facts, this is for you. We will delve further into everything else a little later on. But 3.18 will come to the PTU towards the end of June and likely remain on the PTU for around 3 months, with an estimated live release being the Q3 window, so around September time. As this brings with it the persistent entity streaming, which will require a lot of testing, salvaging, that will allow player ships to be salvageable, the cargo refactor, and also it sounds like Gen 12 and Bounty Hunting version 2. Now, in the meantime, between now and then, we will have obviously 3.17.1 on the 20th of May for Invictus Week, after which CIG will release a content-rich Alpha 3.17.2 to the live builds, which will bring with it more points of interest, more missions, more gameplay, plus I suspect quality of life improvements, bug fixes, and so on. Now 4.0 is planned to hit the Evocati PTU by the end of the year, with a similar testing phase to 3.18, so lasting a few months to thoroughly test server meshing, which will include Pyro and more content, with a plan to release to live by around Q1 next year, all being well. Now there will be no live CitizenCon this year, or physical CitizenCon, only a digital one again like last year, so the team can continue to focus on the big tech elements, while many devs will hold panels showing off what they are actually working on. Squadron 42 is still major focus, but they are not at the point where they can show us anything. It is still behind the curtain, and there is nothing beyond what I just said about Squadron in this letter. So that is the TLDR version of this letter, very straight to the point, exactly what is what. We will delve into it now so that you can understand the reasoning behind some of these decisions and what it all means. Now the letter kicks off in usual fashion as he talks about how the last couple of years have been for CIG with the pandemic, recent releases and stats on new backers, active players and so forth. I will leave that up to you guys if you want to read it, but skipping over that, we are kicking off with the Road to 4.0 segment. Now this year there are 3 huge tech initiatives that they are rolling out, which will literally change Star Citizen into the actual experience that they are aiming for. The first of these 3 is called Persistent Entity Streaming, which is the tech that enables server meshing. Now he says that Persistent Entity Streaming is the hardest part of the work needed for server meshing, and it required the most engineering, as this fundamentally changes how they record the state of the universe and deliver a level of persistence that has really never been seen in a game before. In essence, you could drop an item in a forest on Microtech and then return to that location several days later after logging out, logging back in again to find the item still there, obviously provided no one has actually gone and taken them. Now Chris Roberts does go into more detail about the journey to getting the entity graph and replication layer and how much work is involved compared to server meshing, but ultimately he is happy to report that after 16 months of hard work, that the team were able to demonstrate persistent entity streaming working last week in their weekly internal PU update meeting, which is very exciting news. Basically, Paul Reindell, who is the Director of Engineering for Online Tech at CIG, spun up a server, populated the entity graph to its initial state along with the replication layer, then connected a client, placed down some small objects like cans on the surface of Aberdeen along with an 890 jump and an anvil arrow, at which point he proceeded to kill the server, kill the client, and then when the server was restarted, he then connected a client, warped to Aberdeen, and everything was there as he'd placed it. So a major milestone reached, as everything was recorded to the backend database, and after restarting, it just connected to the replication layer, which had initialized from the database, being the entity graph, and continued with the universe in the state that he left it in. Now, Chris does say that this may not sound all that revolutionary to some, but once this persistent entity streaming comes online, Star Citizen will be a different universe. This level of persistence provides a universe that is affected by players' actions, with the state of the universe being dynamic and persistent. And an example that he gives is You could crash land on a planet and your shipwreck will persist while you then forage for food or water to survive, he also says, and perhaps wood to make a fire to keep warm, which by the way is the first time they've actually officially mentioned the ability to craft campfires, which is massive news to me, especially with all the work on this fire hazard system. But anyway, from there you could log off and come back to what you've built, or perhaps you've been rescued and then another player will stumble upon the wreck of your old ship and the long extinguished campfire, or you could just find a corner of the galaxy to make your own, collect resources and import materials to build an outpost, decorate or arrange your hangar or home however you want to. So it is quite exciting that that option, that ability to do this kind of stuff, the tech to allow that is coming this year. Also, with this tech in place, server meshing becomes possible, and instead of the server dropping to 5 frames a second due to the simulation load, they can just spin up a new server and then another to spread the load and keep the updated tick rate higher, which is the ultimate goal of dynamic server meshing and pretty much what they're working towards. He did say though, due to this complexity, there is going to be a lot of edge cases, a lot of issues that they have not come across, so do expect a bumpy road, which leads on to the testing release cadence for 2022 segment. Now, CIG will be approaching 3.18 differently than previous releases. They suspect this patch will require a much longer time in the Evocati and PTU phases, so all PTU phases, than previous releases due to those many fundamental changes. Now, as said before, they estimate that the PTU phase for 3.18 could last as long as 3 months. Obviously, this is a give and take, depending on how it goes. So in order to keep the concurrent players happy, who are just happy playing whatever the live servers offer, they will be releasing a content-rich patch, which will be Alpha 3.17.2 in late June. Now, this will contain known stable code, new missions, new locations like wrecks and other points of interest, I suspect, and some other gameplay as well, while 3.18 is on the PTU for thorough testing, with the plan of releasing 3.18 live in around Q3, so September time. Now, 3.18 will contain salvage, physicalized cargo, and persistent entity streaming, plus the bulk of the Gen 12 conversion, with Vulkan, they say, coming in a later patch, but hopefully by the end of this year. So to summarize, 3.18 will enter PTU towards the end of June, and potentially last 3 months, as I say, give or take, depending on how smooth it goes. Fingers crossed everything goes really well and they can bring things forwards, but ultimately it could go the other way. And this PTU build will have the features mentioned above, with the plan to release that build to live in the Q3 window, being around the end of September. And while 3.18 is on the PTU, a 3.17.2 build will release with the same code as 3.17.1, but contain more missions, locations, and other gameplay. So they're basically trying to cater for as many people as they can, providing content to keep us engaged each quarter, all the while providing us with 3.18 on the PTU for voluntary testing if we want to put ourselves through it, to basically stress test the build for them with all the amounts of people playing it and the craziness we do, helping to find issues and ultimately get them fixed as soon as possible. So a great compromise, I feel personally, which I'm sure I'll be playing both, just depending on my levels of patience each day. Now, Chris also mentioned that they engineered salvaging and the cargo factor with persistent entity streaming in mind, meaning players' shipwrecks will stick around for other players to salvage in 3.18, so I suspect salvage will basically be a mega lucrative role, as there is always a constant flurry of ships being destroyed or damaged, and they will just be left for players to discover and salvage. He also says that they are working on a density manager to manage all the many random items that players drop, which could clutter up the servers and cause issues, so cleaning up the low priority items first, like empty bottles and cans, for example. Of course, they won't clear players' ships and anything that is of high priority, but they will also likely create an AI janitor, or maybe enforce crime stats, or I would think more reasonably, fines for littering at certain locations. Now, I think if they have bins set up at these locations as kind of black holes where you can throw something in and it takes it away from the server, that would probably be a good encouragement for players to do that, or maybe offer the option to pay players in-game using UEC to clean up. I think that would be great for a zero to hero starting career as a bit of a janitor around a landing zone and earning enough to get your first ship. I don't know, but it sounds like a good idea, just a thought. But let us get back to the letter. So, server meshing. Server meshing, Chris says, will be approached in the same way that they approached persistent entity streaming. It is the final tech building block and it will be 4.0. The first version of server meshing will be static server meshing, where each server is given a defined area to simulate, and as soon as static server meshing is stable, they will then move towards dynamic server meshing with subsequent releases, which basically allows much more scalability as servers will no longer be bound by location, but instead distributed by load. 4.0 will of course bring the second star system as well, being Pyro, and they will also begin the process of adding more content, gameplay and polish to get to beta. The current goal for introducing server meshing and 4.0 is an early tech preview for EVOCATI testers on the PTU at the end of Q4 this year, so allowing the most ardent players to help with testing server meshing so that they can help to refine and polish it for release. And just like how they roll out 3.18 with persistent entity streaming, this is heavily conditioned on how well and easy persistent entity streaming rollout goes. So he does warn that there is a high chance of this slipping into Q1 next year, but of course only once they start testing with the PTU players will they get a better idea of how much time it will take before it's ready for live, which as it stands right now, the live rollout for server meshing and 4.0 is for Q1 next year, providing all goes to plan. Now, personally speaking, I am very happy to hear this. Of course, I would much prefer, as everyone else would, to have server meshing and 4.0 live by the end of the year with 3.18 earlier, but I am just so excited to hear that they are almost at the point of testing this. And of course, it could go either way, but I feel 3.18 will have more than enough to keep me entertained and playing while the EVOCATI chip away at server meshing, with next year bringing the first leap into Pyro. At this point, I just want them to do it right without cutting any corners so that it is everything we need it to be. And so by the end of this year, we will have the persistent entity streaming, salvaging, which includes the salvaging of wrecks left by players, cargo refactor, Gen 12 and hopefully Vulkan, plus, as he says, bounty hunting version 2, all live, which in my book would be a big win. Now, we don't exactly know what bounty hunting version 2 entails, but do watch my video linked below, which talks further about the goals and the end goal basically for bounty hunting for more idea on what to expect. So 2022 will be one hell of a year with some very exciting content coming, and server meshing, Pyro and 4.0 early next year. And if you are playing the PTU, do expect a very bumpy road, most likely worse than what we had with early 3.17 patches, but with the live build kicking off with 3.17.1 and Invictus, followed by the 3.17.2 content-rich patch, culminating in this monster 3.18 patch for the end of the year. I am really looking forward to this year and all the content that we will get, hopefully seeing some leaks of Pyro and 4.0 too. Now, later on in the letter, he does talk about CitizenCon. There will be no live CitizenCon this year or gameplay demo, as they are all really wanting to focus on just completing the last hurdle of tech and Squadron 42, which they are, as I say, remaining quiet as they are not ready to pull back the curtain on that yet. Instead, there will be another digital CitizenCon, which will be a celebration of the community, they say, with presentations and panels from the developers sharing progress of what to expect in the near future. So basically not taking anyone away from what they are focusing on to create a CitizenCon specific presentation, more allowing them to continue working, but just showcasing what they are working on at that moment. And personally speaking, as much as I would love for a live event, I am more than happy for them to just knuckle down now, as they are so close to this initial finish line for the tech, and really push to get that done with no distractions or pressures for showing a demo. And hopefully next year a live event would be a great way to celebrate the hard work of getting to 4.0. Now, there are plans for devs to attend Bar Citizens this year, with them naming the inverse First Contact Day, which is basically when humans first encountered a new race, being the Banu. I think that was June the 12th, officially naming that day as International Bar Citizen Day in the real world, with more info on various Bar Citizens happening around the world and throughout the year. And Chris finishes the letter off by just kind of rounding it up in a bit of a bubble. This year we can expect Invictus happening on the 20th, persistent entity streaming, salvage, physicalized cargo, bounty hunting version 2, new events, new missions, enhancements on Jumptown, new ships like the Corsair, the Vulture and the Hull C, plus more I'm certain, but he didn't specify any others, as well as more quality of life improvements and new player onboarding improvements, and hopefully for the PTU, Server Meshing and Pyro. And to finish off the letter, he does talk about how they are expanding the development studios here in the UK and also over in Germany right now, with plans to expand Austin and then later on LA studios as well. But that was the important need to know information from Chris Roberts' latest letter. Some big changes this year. And as I say, I feel CIG have decided to try and cater for all by continuing to provide as solid of an experience as they can on the live build, releasing more content for players to enjoy, but at the same time, bringing these big ticket items on the PTU for those who want to help test and do so, as it is going to be rough, but so worth it to help get that major milestone achieved, with the potential of 4.0 and the all-important server meshing tech in the PTU by the end of the year. So a massive year for Star Citizen, which I am very excited to see unfold this year, and as an optimist, I'm really hoping that things will roll out smoother than expected, rather than the opposite, and they can get on with fixing things quickly to see the bigger, better things coming in faster. Of course, I will continue to cover all of this here on my YouTube and over at Twitch, so here is to an incredible 2022 and sharing in the continued journey with all of you guys, as this has and continues to be a pleasure for me from when I first backed in 2012 to where we are now 10 years later with the potential of almost all elements of making this insane game possible. So a big thank you from me to all of my viewers and the community for all of your continued support throughout the last 10 years. And here is to one of, if not the most significant year for Star Citizen to date. But with that said, if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. Also, come and hang out over at twitch.tv/supermacbrother. Hopefully, I found some time today to stream. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, it does do the channel a big favour, and tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, big thank you to my patrons and channel members. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.